Long before Spanish conquistadors crossed the landscape, before trappers followed the rivers and streams, long before pioneering settlements dotted this region, before anyone else would try to write their history, 5 principal nations of indigenous people called the Great Basin their homeland. Theirs is the first story of the people in this place. I'm Forrest Kutch. Join me as we step into the extraordinary world of the Ute.
Native Americans do not forget where they came from and in what direction they're going and who they're going to answer to.
Our native traditions, our culture will be here for generations to come.
You know, if our ancestors weren't strong, we would have died a long time ago.
We Shall Remain, A Native History of Utah is made possible by the George S. and Dolores Doré Eccles Foundation, William M. and Carrie Armstrong, WGBH, the R. Harold Burton Foundation, the Lawrence T. D. Janet T. D. Foundation, and the contributing members of KUED. Thank you.
The bear's the one that gave the Utes the dance itself. It's part of the way of waking up the spring, the way that bears hibernate. He's the one that sleeps through winter, and when the first thunder comes, like that sound, that's a thunder. It represents waking up the bear and the coming of better times. But the true simplicity and joy of what I understand from my belief is what brings all of the rules and the formulas for our way of life are for the people. That it's a matter of healing, of being together, and that in fact the most important thing about all of those things we do is for each other.
The Utes have celebrated the bear dance for hundreds of years. It's a tradition that predates Mormon pioneers and Spanish conquistadors who called us Utahs or Ute. It goes back to a time when we called ourselves Nooch, the people. A time when we lived in small family groups, traveling on foot, when men hunted and fished while women gathered roots, berries, and seeds. They mended clothing and shelters and cared for the children. Then, in the 1600s, the Nooch encountered the Spanish. They introduced us to the horse and a new concept, slavery. Soon, our life ways changed.
Before the Spaniards brought the horse, we call it guva. Before the horse, we were on foot, and we could only go so far as our feet would carry us. What we learned from the Spaniards were how to use that horse to conquer other people. So it made our people very powerful. We were a feared people, nation.
They pushed the other tribes out. The strongest held their place. That's why Utes were never removed from the mountains, because it was solid. That's why we're still mountain people. I think the Utes as a whole were really a strong tribe. So they didn't remove us. We're still here.
We are still here. Today, over 6,000 Ute live in the mountains, deserts, and cities throughout the West. We have 3 tribal reservations: the Northern Ute headquartered in Fort Duchesne, Utah, the Southern Ute in Ignacio, Colorado, and the Ute Mountain Ute in the Four Corners region, including the White Mesa community in Utah. But there was a time when much of the basin and plains, the lands that would become Utah and Colorado, were our home. Before settlers entered our homeland, there were bands of Ute ranging across most of Colorado and Utah and parts of Wyoming and New Mexico. For hundreds of years, the Ute negotiated or bartered with European outsiders in our territory. But in 1847, everything changed when religious leader Brigham Young led a group of Mormon settlers into the Salt Lake Valley.
He said, this is a place. But the question that always is there from the Indian point of view is, where was the Indian that was supposed to be standing there and says, this is yours? It's gone. The man just went there and said, this is a place, without inquiring about who lives there.
Well, when the settlers came, they were different than the other people that came through Ute country. They stayed. They took the best hunting lands. They killed all the game to feed them. And everything that we praised or held worth anything, they ate it up. And our people kept getting pushed and pushed till we were just in the way. So they killed all the game that we used to get there. And our people said, well, you kill ours, we're going to kill your cows. And that's what they started to do. But the way that the settlers felt was that everything was here for them. And it's completely different as thinking as far as native people.
Remember that we're not speaking the same language, Ute and English. And they cannot communicate to each other and say, here's what I'm doing. So the difference is there. So one treated as a war, the other one treated as a trade.
Between 1858 and 1872, we resisted Mormon settlement in a series of skirmishes known as the Walker and Black Hawk Wars. But the steady stream of settlers was too great, and we continued getting pushed off our traditional lands. Pioneer leaders turned to Washington for a solution.
And they eventually petitioned Abraham Lincoln to set up a reservation.
They sent scouts out here to this area to look for a colony for them, and they couldn't find any land that was suitable for farming. And one of them went back and reported to Brigham Young that the only reason for this place to be here was to hold the world together. So to them it was worthless. So that's why they generally put Indian reservations.
The Nooch way of life was quickly disappearing. Government policy marginalized us onto reservations and forced us to stop hunting and become farmers. It was a huge transition for the Ute, and once again the two cultures clashed. The last major Ute uprising occurred in 1879 on the White River Reservation in western Colorado. At the heart of the conflict was Indian agent Nathaniel Meeker.
He wanted to make us farmers, and we weren't that way. We weren't farmers. We were hunters and gatherers, and we just listened to him until he started having his workers plow up our racetrack. And then the Indian people knew they got mad, and that was it. We weren't going to take it anymore. And the army was sent in, and the Ute people had to decide, we going to live this way rest of our life, or are we going to fight? And we'd been pushed so much. We were told this was yours, and they took more and more and more. So we decided to fight. And the result of that fight, we defeated the army, but the result of the fight meant the removal of our people over from Colorado to this reservation here today.
Over 1,500 men, women, and children were ordered to leave. they were marched from their homeland to Utah's Uinta and Ouray Reservation, conveniently opening up thousands of acres of prime mining and farming land for white settlers.
The Meeker incident is actually part of a bigger movement. The state of Colorado was wanting the Indians to be removed. One way or another, they would exterminate them.
Once again, the Nooch were forced off of ancestral land that was integral to our spirituality and way of life. It was an all too familiar story, a story shared throughout generations.
My grandmother's story. She would talk to us about when they walked you from Maker to here. They told them, don't take anything, only what you can pack on your back. So they left a lot of their belongings there. They just left. Many people cried, and we came here as poor people. And I think that, too, that we are still attached to Meeker in such a way that the sacred sites are still there. You go to the mountains at Flat Top, you find the teepee rings, you find the Vision Quest sites. We own the spirit, or the spirit owns us. So like you can remove a person from a country, but you can never remove a country from a person.
Our land is important to the Nooch. Place and spirit go hand in hand. Connecting to nature is integral to our spirituality. Ceremonies center on the sun, on light. Mountains, rock, and sacred sites ground us, as do everyday prayers and rituals. This moment-to-moment connection to place and spirit is one way Nooch belief often differs from other religions.
And prophets seem to control groups. Like Far East, we have the Buddhists. Then Christianity have theirs. Then others have theirs too. Whereas Indian, Native American, is putting that in nature.
Yeah, so nature is our religion and mountains are our steeples.
Our prophet is a light. The sun is our prophet. You know, it's something that we didn't lose. It's embedded into an Indian thinking. Each one of you have a way to connect to nature and the spirit. I ask of you to use that this evening. And with that, a short prayer for all of us. Nuti maro mapagat chewan punit katama tawachniya tamar mapagat. Puni war tamokat maro amar manaitit. The language that we speak today, we use that to communicate. But the other part to that, it contains words which has a spiritual connection to nature or the higher level of spirit. Words that we cannot put into like English. That's why it's important. The language itself at this point is deteriorating. With that, kind of gives you the feeling that we are losing our identity. Once the language is gone, there will be no more Ute tribe.
Everyone, Mike. Mike. This is how it looks. When I write it, that means hello. Everyone, Mike. 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 Mike.
Benita Tavapont teaches Ute traditions at Uinta River High School. She is battling cancer while fighting to keep Ute language and culture alive.
Mike. They need to learn how to be Ute. And I see too many of the students coming into this high school now that have little knowledge or no knowledge of being Ute. And what I mean by saying being Ute is being able to communicate, being able to have knowledge of Ute cultural practices. It's not just beads and feathers, it's how your family is, the values your family has. And if you're not secure in your own identity and secure in knowing your language and your culture, that you are going to have a problem anywhere you go. That's going to be pretty.
Without a strong cultural identity, it can be difficult to achieve in school. In Utah, American Indian students are twice as likely to drop out compared to the state average.
One of the things that we need to realize that they're in competition with a non-Indian student in the local high school. To be competitive, it means you have to speak out. You have to be the first one to raise your hand. You have to be, quite vocal. We're not taught to be quite vocal. And so if you're competing and you're not from a culture that emphasizes competition, then you're not going to do as well. Okay, good, excellent. Some people say that they walk in two worlds, the non-Indian world and the Indian world. But one of the things that I found as an Indian person is that I think you have to be strong in your own language and your own culture, in your own identity, knowing where you come from and knowing where you're going, and to be able to do that. And I think the students today, or young people today, have a hard time because they don't have that knowledge or that being able to move easily between the two. And sometimes I see them hurting because of that. My grandfather had told me that you take the good from our culture and what we do, and you take the good from the non-Indian culture and you put it together and to be successful. And if I want them to have success, I want them to be strong in their own language, in their own culture, their own traditional practices. I want them to be strong in that. Hey, cool. You guys.
The fight to keep language and culture alive isn't the only challenge facing the Ute. We also have struggles with gangs, substance abuse, violence, and healthcare. Although statistics and problems vary from community to community, it's difficult to ignore the overwhelming trends. 1 in 3 American Indian women will be raped in their lifetime, and suicide and early death rates are higher than the national norm.
I see it around me. I know I have to call my older brother constantly and tell him who of his friends passed away. He's 34. Constantly watching the young people die. That's not something that just stops. And every time that comes to us, it's difficult. How would it be if we went to prom and within 10 years, half of those boys were dead? That's the reality. How would it be if you went to prom and half of the girls that were in beautiful prom dresses had been raped within the next 6 months? How would it be if 3/4 of them in the next 2 years after that had babies? Those are very real things in my world too. That's why I plead with them, as young people. Treasure yourself.
There's no outfit alike. I wish we could go to Walmart for this stuff. Wouldn't that be great?
After nearly 130 years, the Ute are once again dancing near the White River. The people of Meeker and a delegation of Ute worked together to host the first annual Smoking River Powwow. It is a chance to begin healing, a chance to revisit sacred grounds and battle sites. But the past isn't so easily buried. History remains alive, especially for a people connected to their ancestors. And the pain and fear of war and the exodus from home still reverberate today.
Well, our people said, don't tell, don't talk about this. It was had such a horrendous effect, physically, psychologically on them. We're still in that psychological trauma today. When I feared to drive off and come over into this valley, I had great fear of it. Although we knew our ancestors loved this land. And when they were taken out by gunpoint by the military, they cried out of this valley. They walked out crying. And so that's what I feel when I come over here. I feel that loss and that hurt. But I want to tell what happened here. And that, I guess, would mean that I have to come back here. And I'll do it for the children. And I guess we need to have a healing from this. And having a powwow is not really a healing. It just says we're here. We're dancing.
For hundreds of years, our people had been here. The remains of my people is here. So that's why we find that it's always a good feeling to come back home to our homeland. So I want to say this to my ancestors. I did not forget you. We did not forget you. We returned. We're back here. Now we're here.
We're still here in spite of genocide, in spite of being chased off the land, in spite of being moved by gunpoint, and land being taken away, and the greater society not having any respect for our culture. We're still here.
We hold the blood of our families, and we are Ute. That's us. That's us that drives the truck down the road. That's us that farms in the field. That's us that's in college. And that's what I see as a Ute, is all of the variety of life that began from our ancestral lands, from our home, began from that time, spreading out to today. And we're so many things. We're everything.
And I think it encompasses a lot of things, and not just your own culture and your own traditions, but everything in this day and age is what being Nooch means to me. And hopefully that I have been walking in the path that my grandmothers have wanted me to do, and my grandfather and the people before them, what they wanted or their grandchildren to do. I hope I'm walking in that path.
We Shall Remain, A Native History of Utah is made possible by the George S. and Dolores Doré Eccles Foundation, William M. and Carrie Armstrong, WGBH, the R. Harold Burton Foundation, the Lawrence T. D. Janet T. D. Foundation, and the contributing members of KUED. Thank you.